And I'm the head of adult programming here at Darien Library. Thank you so much for coming out tonight as we conclude our Fall Meet the Author series. We have a very special event planned for you tonight. I'd like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by our annual Friends of the Library campaign, so thank you for your continued support to make our programs and collections available to the community. I'd also especially like to thank Rosanna Nissen from Barrett Bookstore for making tonight's event possible. And also thank you to St. Francis Winery and Vineyard for generously donating the wine that you're enjoying tonight. If you've ever visited the blog Food52.com, then you know what it feels like to have your mouth water. Our guest tonight founded Food52 with the goal of creating the very first crowdsourced cookbook. Every week for a year, which is where the number 52 comes from, by the way, they hold recipe contests to determine who has the best holiday punch recipe, risotto recipe, Italian dessert, beer cocktail. I think you got the idea. It was from this project that something delicious and magical grew. Food52 is a community-driven website where users give each other cooking tips and recipe recommendations, connecting people who love food. More recently, they've come out with an iPad app, which Gizmodo called the best cooking app for the holidays. And they told me before this event that it's actually on sale for half off today because it's Cyber Monday. There's also a hotline on the site where people can call when they're in a cooking conundrum to receive fast answers from experienced home cooks. Over 40 Food52 member-hosted potlucks happened around the country this year and growing, and the blog is only 2 years old. The co-founders of Food52.com are our featured speakers tonight. One of them, Amanda, was recently named one of 50 women game changers in food by Gourmet. She's written the award-winning books Cooking for Mr. Latte and The Cook and the Gardener, and edited the essay collection Eat Memory. Her latest book, a New York Times bestseller and the winner of a James Beard Award, is the Essential New York Times Cookbook. She also briefly appeared in the movie Julie and Julia, playing herself. Our other guest, Merrill, graduated from Brown University, and following that, Le Cordon Bleu in London. In addition to working with Amanda on the Essential New York Times Cookbook, Merrill has also written for the Times Tea Living, Edible Brooklyn, Body and Soul, and Culinate.com, and she was the food editor at Herb Quarterly. These remarkable home chefs are not only the brains and brawn behind Food52.com, but they're also the reason I add goat cheese and caramelized onions to my mashed potatoes. So Amanda and Merrill, my roommates, thank you. Now please join me in welcoming to Darien Library, Amanda Hesser and Merrill Stubbs.
Oh, good. Let me know if you can't hear us, but we'll try to speak loudly since we're sharing the microphone. So good to see all of you here, and what a nice crowd. It's amazing what a few cookies will do.
Yeah. And Erin, thank you for such a lovely and thorough and flattering introduction. It's really sweet.
Yeah. So we usually give cooking demonstrations and not talks. So we're going to keep it sort of short and sweet. We did a slideshow that kind of takes you through what we do and what we did to put this book together. And we thought we would sort of tell you about Food52, how we did the book, and then we'll take your questions. So there she is, very handsome. That picture is of zucchini pancakes, which is a fantastic recipe. And the photo was taken at my husband's family summer house in Long Island on the table, which is very much our style, which every photo in the book was styled by me and Merrill, cooked by me and Merrill, and often shot in my bedroom.
Great light.
We're very, yeah, it's good light. But that's sort of our style. We're very scrappy. Merrill, and do you want You want to tell how we met?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Amanda and I met, we think 6 or 7 years ago at this point. We're starting to lose track, which I think is a good sign. But Amanda was just starting to work on the Essential New York Times Cookbook, which Erin mentioned, which came out last year, and she knew it was going to be a pretty big project. It was going to span over 150 years of recipes from the New York Times. And so she thought, maybe I could use a little help with this. And so someone luckily introduced us, and we started working together. And over the course of the next 5 or so years, we did everything from research, all the recipes that might go into the book, to test all the recipes that ended up going into the book. We ended up testing over 1,400 recipes together. Yeah. And we had a great time doing it, and we became really good friends. It was either going to be that, or we would hate each other at the end, I think. So luckily, it went the right way. And we just also realized that we had a common sort of view on food and cooking, and we were able to work well together in the kitchen, which isn't always the case with two people who have strong feelings about food and cooking. So we had sort of complementary interests and skills and dislikes. Amanda is really good at making and rolling out and shaping dough of any kind, and I'm terrible at it, so I always let her do that. And I am sort of obsessed with cutting vegetables into precise cubes from my cooking school days, so she lets me do that.
Meryl paid attention in cooking school, and I did not.
So anyway, we became great friends, and we also, through the work on the Essential New York Times Cookbook, we came up with the idea for Food52 for a number of reasons. And the first was an observation that we made while working on the New York Times book, which really was, to us, very interesting. Amanda put a query out in the paper at the beginning of the project asking readers for their favorite New York Times recipes of all time. And we got thousands and thousands of letters and emails and Xeroxed recipes and old, yellow clippings. And there was sort of an interesting pattern that we noticed as time went on, which is that a lot of the recipes that were most recommended actually originated from home cooks rather than from chefs or even the professional food writers who'd written about them. So, Craig Claiborne might have written about an apple cake, but it wasn't his recipe. It was a recipe from a woman that he'd heard about who made the best apple cake in her town and was known for it. And this was a recipe that resonated with readers, and they would make it year after year, pass it along. Something about it really stuck with them. And we sort of thought about that from our own perspective as well, and thought about the fact that recipes from home cooks, often have this interesting sort of dual character of being both practical, because you often just have what you have and you need to use what you have on hand, right, to make something for dinner, but also inventive, because home cooks are often cooking every night of the week or nearly every night of the week, and so they don't want to be making the same thing over and over again. So it's sort of a winning combination that tends to speak to other home cooks, and is a little bit different from recipes that originate from chefs and professionals who may be sort of a little bit more precise and sort of out there at times. So that was one observation that we had. And then the other was in observing the sort of general food trends around us as food writers and editors over the last decade or so. We had obviously noticed this huge explosion of food blogs. And not only that, but just the general tendency for home cooks to not just consume food media, but also starting to produce it themselves, and to sort of want to get their voices out there and express their opinions about food and cooking, and share their sort of growing wealth of knowledge about food and cooking. And we figured, if there are all these food bloggers, there must also be all these other great home cooks who have all this knowledge, but don't necessarily have the time or the inclination to have their own blogs, and there isn't really a place online for them. At least that was how it seemed to us. And there are places where people could add recipes to a website, but it was just sort of usually a giant pool of recipes with no sense of curation or quality control, and no real organization or voice. And so we thought, well, this is what we can add as food editors and sort of experienced cooks ourselves is a level of curation to the crowdsourcing element that we felt there was a real sort of hunger for people to express themselves and share their recipes, share their opinions about food online.
So, we also kind of took a nod from the great tradition of community cookbooks that have been, popular for decades and decades, but that also they are kind of slightly flawed in the sense that they tend to be, a community decides they're going to do a cookbook and everybody sends in their recipes, and there's probably lots of internal politics about which recipes get chosen, and there are sometimes repeats, and nothing is tested, and there's no kind of like singular point of view necessarily. And it's not that these cookbooks aren't good, because there's certainly ones that are really wonderful, but we felt like there could be a better model, and you could use technology to kind of get there. So we decided to come up with, we wanted a food site that was, that did everything, that was crowdsourced and curated, but we felt like, let's start with a really simple idea, something that we know how to do, which is we know how to make cookbooks. So we decided that we're going to create the first crowdsourced curated cookbook in 52 weeks. And so we, the way we did it was we went out and we got our publishing deal with HarperCollins, and then we used all of our advance money and built our site. And actually, that's not what we did first. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a reverse. The first thing we did is we had this idea, and so we thought we were going to test this out among our friends and family. And those recipes, actually, you'll see in the first section of the book, like the first 15 pages, are the results of that test. And so we emailed all of the kind of like food people we know, and we named recipe themes. One was like a bolognese or ragu. And we asked people to send in their recipes by email, and then we tested them and we named finalists and people voted. We did the whole thing that we do on Food52 by email. Merrill's mother totally creamed everybody because she's such an amazing cook. And so we felt like, wait, there's something here. We know that this can work, and that our system sort of makes sense. Cooking contests, people love contests, right? I think I spent too much time watching American Idol, so I was just convinced, right? That our contest thing was going to work. And so we launched the site, and in the first couple of weeks, it was what we did was we would name a theme, and we used the themes as our way of curating the cookbook, because we knew that if there weren't enough fruit recipes, we could make a plum tart theme, or we knew that we could sort of shape the chapters so that it would be a very kind of well-rounded cookbook. It would hit, 52 weeks allows us to hit every season, every holiday, and very neatly kind of works out to be a perfect cookbook size, right? So we would name these themes in the first couple of weeks. We would basically call, I remember emailing my sister and saying, no, you have to submit a recipe. I'm sorry, I know you have your own life, but because we had the site closed. It was a sort of a closed alpha, as they call it in the startup world, and that's how we first got going. And then once we opened it, which was in September of 2009, it was a bit of a floodgates kind of situation, and that was really great because suddenly all of these people who we didn't know started showing up, and all of these amazing cooks from all over the place, and we are going to introduce you to some of them. But what you want to take them through the contest system?
Oh yeah. So Erin mentioned that we run recipe contests every week. We now actually do it every other week because after 2 years of running weekly contests, we all got a little tired, including the people submitting, who expressed great relief that we were relaxing the schedule a little bit. But we initially actually ran 2 recipe contests every week, which is why there are 140 recipes in this cookbook as opposed to 52. We also ended up naming some wild card winners, which were sort of our favorites that weren't necessarily submitted to contests, things that we sort of plucked out and tested ourselves behind the scenes, and then kind of bestowed a wild card trophy on them. But anyway, so the contests, as Amanda said, we name the themes, which is again our way of sort of molding the cookbook a little bit, although we never know what we're going to get. So we might ask for your best chocolate dessert or your best roast chicken, and then anyone can submit original recipes by uploading them to the site, and we don't limit the number or anything. And a lot of people submit a lot of recipes.
We've also caught some people submitting under different names.
We
So they can double their chances.
We won't say who.
Which Merrill, I won't name the person, but or the people, I should say. But Merrill identified this by the way they twisted their spaghetti.
There was a signature look to a lot of the photographs. And I went, wait a minute, I've seen that before. But kudos to her for really.
I know she's trying to work the system.
Yeah. So anyway, we read through all the recipe submissions with every contest. We still do this. We have a bunch of really enthusiastic readers who now help us out. In the beginning, it was just the two of us, but now we have a little support. And we keep this spreadsheet in a Google Doc behind the scenes where we all kind of put in our votes as to which recipes we think sound really great and should be tested. And then by sort of pooling all of our votes, we come up with a list of usually 10 to 15% of the entries of recipes that we actually test. So, and again, this is something Amanda and I used to do every weekend. We would just spend our whole weekends testing recipes, and then over time, the number of submissions has gotten to the point where we needed some help. So we now have professional recipe testers who we trust greatly, who do the testing for us behind the scenes, and they then weigh in with very detailed results and say what worked, what didn't work, what they love, whether they recommend that recipe as a potential finalist or not. And then we compile all those results and pick 2 finalists for each theme, each contest. So the idea is that those 2 recipes are both worthy of going into a cookbook. They're 2 excellent recipes that we can fully get behind, and we actually do a photo shoot for each of them, so that we do have a step-by-step photo slideshow for anyone who wants to just see how the recipe is made but may not have time to make it themselves. They can still vote with some level of knowledge, and then we put the 2 finalists up for a vote, and our audience votes and decides on the winner, and we don't weigh in on that process ever. We can say that actually with full conscience. And then the winner would go into the cookbook, and so we sort of built the cookbook week by week. We ended up with obviously 2 winners each week because we did 2 recipe contests each week. I'm exhausted just thinking about us doing that. And that is how the cookbook came to be.
Yeah. So I think we can start our slideshow now, right? So we just put together sort of
behind the scenes
visual narrative.
This is Amanda's kitchen, by the way, where we do our photo shoots every Tuesday. We shoot all the content on the site and the finalist recipes from start to finish.
I like cookbooks and study.
Here are 2 people who make frequent appearances, much to the delight of all of us. Amanda's 2 children, Hattie and Walker.
They've also vetted all of the recipes.
They have. And they eat everything, including octopus tentacles. So this is a little more behind the scenes at Amanda's dining room table, probably plotting the next week's theme or something. A little bit of our equipment, and Amanda's very meticulously organized spice drawer. It's alphabetically organized. Yeah. I could never ever maintain that in my house. This is one of our winners that's in the book. It's called Secret Ingredient Beef Stew. And does anyone know what the secret ingredient is? Does anyone see it?
I don't need it. It's anchovy. Which just gives the sauce this really kind of nice depth to it.
And this is actually a recipe by a friend of ours and a food blogger. So she and her partner in crime have a blog called Big Girl Small Kitchen, and actually they have their own cookbook out as well now, which I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Quarter life crisis is their theme.
Luciana's porchetta was, we did one contest where we went out against Books Illustrated, braised pork, right?
Yep.
Or not braised pork.
Roast pork.
Roast pork,
Mhm.
of course. Roast pork and sugar cookies, and I see that actually, I think one of the sugar cookies that was a finalist for us, we wanted to sort of test, Chris Kimball had sort of made some kind of statement about how crowdsourcing doesn't work. And so we wanted to put that to the test, and so Slate hosted this contest. And sadly we did lose, but only by 2 votes, which we felt actually was a huge triumph, given that Books Illustrated is a huge brand and a wonderful company, and we felt proud that our, our little company could stand up against them in a contest. And Luciana's porchetta was our finalist, and it's an amazing recipe, and it's by a woman named Allie Wax, who has she's a chef at a restaurant in Philadelphia. It's called Delicatessen, but she is also just a wonderful cook.
The other winner's here too. Where's Liz? Where are you?
There you are.
So the other, we did a face-off both with roast pork and with sugar cookies, as Amanda mentioned.
Okay.
And Liz's sugar cookies were the winner for that contest, and it wasn't really close. And I believe they're here tonight. And actually, something interesting also about this photograph, it's one of our, what we call our ingredient shots, which is something that we take, or it's a piece of one of our ingredient shots of a larger photo. With each finalist recipe, we do the full slideshow and a final finished dish shot, but we also started early on taking a photo of all the ingredients before we actually cooked with them, and it's become somewhat of a signature, and it's something we love doing. It's kind of a sort of, an artsy element to what we do. A little more porchetta action.
Yeah, porchetta is best made with 2 people. As you can see, there's a lot of rolling and tying.
And slicing.
Yeah.
And this was a really fantastic carbonara recipe that actually was submitted by one of the 2 men who designed our website.
Yes.
He's an architect, but also has a web design firm, and lives in Brooklyn, has 2 kids, and this is one of their favorite dishes. For good reason.
It's fantastic.
Another ingredient shot. This is a beautiful pistachio meringue stack. We'll get to the finished shot in a second. It's one of the more gorgeous recipes.
It's really one of the fanciest recipes, but it's very worth the time.
Yeah. If you've ever had pavlova, it's basically just like a constructed version of pavlova rather than deconstructed.
Pancakes again.
Another one of our ingredient shots. This is for a plum tart.
A savory plum tart.
Yes.
Yeah. A pizza with broccoli brave and potatoes, and we love this recipe. I've made, and also the dough. I've used that dough for pizza like 1,000,000 times.
And these are some of our amazing behind-the-scenes support. So that's Kristen McGlory on the left, who's our senior editor. She's been with us now for 2 years. She also writes a really popular column called Genius Recipes on the site, where she unearths really fantastic recipes from either cookbook authors or chefs, and sort of they all have something to them that makes them genius, and she sort of unearths them and republishes them and talks about why they are genius.
I think that sort of is a kind of guiding principle when we're looking for recipes. Are those recipes that have some kind of detail, a memorable detail, the original flavor combination. One of the recipes that a couple of the ones that we really love are. We love all of our children equally, but it was called Lazy Mary's Lemon Tart, and it's you take a whole lemon, and it's best with a Meyer lemon, but you can do it with regular lemon too, and you chop up the lemon, seeds, everything, and stick it into a blender with butter, eggs, a couple of sugar, a couple other things, and just blend it, and it becomes totally smooth, and then you pour it into a pastry shell and bake it, and that's it. And like you don't detect any skin, any seeds. It's completely smooth like any lemon curd, but it's much better, has much better flavor because you get the oils from the skin, you get the bitterness from the pith, you get all the stuff that you don't get in a regular lemon curd, which is only made with lemon juice.
Yeah, it's really brilliant.
Another ingredient shot.
This is from a arugula salad with pomegranates and pomegranate molasses in the background, which one of our early contests. Great addition to salad dressing. Who knew? Facing off in the kitchen. We rarely disagree, but it looks like maybe we could have a debate about something. This is a blackberry caipirinha. Pretty fantastic. Also taken in Long Island.
Yeah.
You can tell by the light.
And this was a chicken with it was chicken and mustard. I think was the theme.
Chicken and mustard was the theme.
Yeah, and it's a sauteed chicken and beef.
Very silky.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a veal chop longatina, where you roast the garlic and then you grill the chop and combine everything. And there's a lovely fragrant oil.
This is by a guy named Tom Hirschfeld who lives. He's a stay-at-home dad in Indiana, and he lives on a farm. And he used to be a photographer, and so he also cook. And he's an amazing cook, and he submits lots of recipes. And he actually now writes a novel for us about life on his farm.
And that's actually sort of a theme. We've had a few people who started out as early members of the site who've kind of, we've developed like larger relationships with. So there's a woman in DC who's, well, her handle on the site is Mrs. Wheelbarrow, and she does a number of different things, including landscape design, but she is an amazing cook, and she actually teaches cooking classes out of her house. And she started this, she has her own blog, and she started this project called Charcuterie, which is all about charcuterie, and it's a year-long contest that she and her partner have been running among food bloggers, giving them different challenges every month for creating some sort of new type of charcuterie. So it's, pate one month, it's pancetta the next month, and they've been documenting the whole thing. And actually, it's coming to a close, and we're lucky enough to be hosting the final round on Food52 in December. So
It's been amazing. She had something like 300 bloggers sign up to do this, commit to do this for a year.
yeah. And there's our final. Wiping their sleeves. Undoubtedly, they just ate something good. So that's pretty much it for our presentation. Sorry, I can see my messy computer top now. I think probably we're ready to open it up to questions.
The last dish that you showed on the screen,
Yeah.
was that the entire clove of garlic?
Out of garlic? Yeah.
Was that the entire clove of garlic roasted?
Yeah. It's a
The head, the whole
garlic,
head.
Yeah.
The whole head cut in half?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks yummy.
It is yummy.
Yeah.
So Tuesday is your photography day.
Yeah.
Do you do it yourself or do you hire a photographer?
Oh,
We hire a
we
photographer.
hire a photographer. We do the styling, but that's about as far as our talent stretch in that department.
Yeah.
And we, for this book, we worked almost completely with one photographer. Her name is Sarah Schatz, and she actually had never really photographed food before. She specializes in portraiture, but she just loves food, loved the idea of what we were doing, and took a chance on us from the very beginning. And we ended up really sort of, I think, together forming a style over the course of the year, which was really gratifying.
This is a note of caution. People who are allergic to tree nuts and tree nut products are also often allergic to crushed or chewed citrus fruit seeds.
Really?
So you might want to be careful with that recipe.
With that tart?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I have trouble breathing
wouldn't make that chart if I were you. Sadly.
So, what are your future plans for expansion? You start out with a contest, and maybe my guess is that the blog is sort of advertising products and making money there, which is great.
Yeah.
And where are you going from here?
Like
What's the grand plan?
Empire?
Yeah. The Empire's still a little small right now, but we're building it. No, we actually have done a lot in the past year. So we completed our second 52 weeks, and then we actually decided that we were not going to go and do another cookbook. Instead, we were going to do an iPad app. So in 9 weeks, we went from idea to being in the App Store, and we crowdsourced all the recipes. We also crowdsourced tips. We did 100 minutes of original video, 700 photos, and it's done extremely well, and it's a top-rated app in the App Store. So we think that apps are definitely our future, and it's super fun because it's like writing for a newspaper. You see the end product. It's like out the door really quickly instead of a sort of long gestation period. And I think it's sort of more fitting for being a digital company, And so the other things that we've done, we actually have a great partnership with Whole Foods. They came to us about a year and a half ago and said they wanted to start this whole cooking initiative to kind of get people back in the kitchen because they realized that they had done a really good job of actually discouraging people from the kitchen because they do a lot of really great prepared foods, and so they wanted to renovate their bulk section and then have us build websites to help build community around their stores. So we've launched about 40 websites for them, and we also built an iPad app for in their stores. That's been a great project. They're really good partners. We also launched a shop on our site. So we now curate and do sales, and we've expanded the scope of our site. Now, we obviously have recipes and contests, and that's sort of like our showcase content. But we also launched a news section. We also launched something that is a kind of pet project of ours that came out of our own experience as food editors. It's called Hotline, and we built it because as food writers and editors, our friends are constantly calling us, IMing us, texting us with their food problems, right? They're in the grocery store, they can't find the right thing, they're at the stove, something doesn't look right, they need help. And it's this is a universal need. We have the same issue too. We have food questions also, even though we're very immersed in food. And there needed to be a place to kind of do that. So we created this hotline so that you can, because we have this wonderful community that knows a ton about food. And so the idea is that they can, anybody can ask any question at any time, and you get a very rapid response from a well-informed, experienced home cook. Which is personal, as opposed to obviously there's tons of information you can get on Google, but the sort of that personal experience is you can't replicate that. It takes a human touch, and so we created a hotline, and we now have an iPhone app.
What do you charge for that?
That's free.
Free?
Isn't it such a bargain?
Pretty good deal.
What are the hours?
What?
It is, yeah.
All day, 24/7. Yeah. Like sort of a wiki model?
And then ask people, hey, how does this work for you? Or how have you seen has the crowd seen any ways to improve the recipe?
Well, they volunteer their opinions quite readily, which we love. And every recipe has a sort of robust comment section. It's the rare recipe that doesn't have any comments on the site. And some have extensive conversations among people about, ingredient substitutions or, small tweaks. We don't actually, we don't provide a way for people to sort of clone a recipe and change it and then republish it, just because we really believe strongly in the personal voice of the person who created the recipe. And I think, we hope that comes through with the book, because we ask when people submit recipes, at the very top of the recipe form, we ask for them to tell us about the recipe, how it came to be, what the inspiration behind it was, to tell us the story, the personal story behind it. And those are you know, the parts that we actually find the most compelling, is reading people's own head notes, and also the way they write the recipes themselves, because the wonderful thing about home cooks who aren't professional recipe writers is that they don't feel constrained by traditional recipe writing sort of mores, and so you really do get this wonderful descriptive quality to a lot of them, and I think, you know, by sort of encouraging a wiki type model where people can sort of come in and you know, take a recipe and morph it and change it to their taste and then sort of republish it, it takes away a little bit from that personal voice. So we try and just ask people to give their feedback in the comment section. Great if, you know, other people want to take their advice and run with it, but to kind of keep the recipe as a whole.
Twofold comment. My kids are here tonight. We made one of the recipes from your website for Thanksgiving, and it's superb.
Oh, good.
It's the cider braised pork shoulder. And
The girls
it's
love that one.
great, and we've got like 9 pounds of it left over. But I'm curious as to how you guys, you have this concept and you have this great friendship and the symbiosis and all. And it's great because you hear about people engineering their dreams and all these things, and you've got all the gut work that has to go into designing the website and hiring staff and photographers and all that. So when you pulled this all together and you were able to kind of cultivate the idea of, let's say, your web designers and whatnot, can you tell me a little bit about that process and then how it sort of came to, you know, fruition here on the website? I mean, on the internet, rather.
Yeah, it's definitely been an ongoing process over the last 2 years, and you know, things are sort of ever morphing as we learn more about our community and what works well and what, you know, I think with the design element of it, I mean, so long ago when we were designing that first website that we launched with, which looks very different from the site we have up now. I think at that point it was hard to anticipate what people were going to want because we didn't have an audience yet. So we just kind of tried to put together something that we thought we would want to use as, you know, online consumers ourselves, you know, food content and sort of activity online. And then over time, I think you just have to be flexible and willing to make tweaks all the time and not be so wedded to a decision that you can't sort of see past the fact that may not have been the right decision. I mean, I think the beauty of working online is that you can make changes quickly, and the more willing you are to do that, I think probably the more successful you'll be at sort of continually evolving a product so that it meets the needs of your audience. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, like, also, you know, you can't produce a product that you just think is going to please the audience. I think that, like, it's a balance. Like, we created something that, like Merrill said, we wanted to use, and, like, I think, like, for instance, you know, having us as a presence on the site was really important because we were not drawn to sites that felt corporate or like there was not human beings behind it. So we want people to know that we are here, you know, that we don't just run the site, we actually like participate and, you know, are part of the community too. And I think the thing is that like what we didn't plan for was a community, which was really dumb because like if you bring people together, you get a community. But we built like, almost zero tools for that. Well, and so that's what we've like done a lot of thinking around, and we also like sort of feel like it's time for a new kind of community, and what we can call ourselves is a constructive community. Like we like bringing people together, we like the notion of socializing, but we sort of joke that it's like our Yankee side is that like, you know, you gotta be doing something, like you can't just be like hanging around. And so we create cookbooks, you know, we create iPad apps, we help people on our hotline, we get together offline. You know, and our community has led a lot of this too. So we kind of like, we lead, we let them, you know, respond and lead themselves, and it's sort of this sort of ongoing thing. Yeah.
Do you still have time to write your wonderful spreads? What is it like to do that? How do you do that?
Oh, I don't do it anymore, actually. I'm free. No, I actually like finally just stopped because it's so like I loved working for the Times and like it's a really great place to be writing. But it's like we're trying to start a business and it takes more than all of our attention, and so I finally just cut the cord. Well, it's a very different process, Like, the thing is, like, beautiful about a website is that, like, you post something and then you're like, oh God, I forgot to add the salt. Well, I'm going to go in and add the salt. If you forget that in the Times, like, everyone yells at you and you can't fix it and you're just stuck. It's like I wrote this story about I worked like 6 months on developing this like the perfect chocolate or the 3 versions of like the perfect kinds of chocolate chip cookie, like flat and chewy, like thin and crisp, and whatever. And I thought they were perfect. Like, we'd gone through so many versions, and I called for definitely like more salt than I put in the average cookie. It was like a scant tablespoon of kosher salt. And then like the thing gets posted, and just angry calls, angry emails, and it's like in fact, the most memorable one was this woman who was like, I made cookies with my child for the first time, and you ruined the experience. And so it turns out that Morton's kosher salt is saltier than Diamond Crystal, and I used Diamond Crystal, she used Morton. I ruined her experience, but it was like I couldn't fix it, and I had to live with that,
She doesn't sleep at night
so,
still.
but I love the internet because I like problems, everything can be solved, and you just do it.
Yeah.
Amanda, how did you get started?
So I have been like cooking in Europe, and I was a little, I was trying to become a writer. I was like, I was writing a book called The Cook and the Gardener, and living at home with my mother in the woods in Pennsylvania. And that was not going to work out for the long term. So somebody recommended me to the Times. And I was actually about to move to Los Angeles. A very long story, but anyway, it was totally random. I thought it was a prank call because I was like, why would the New York Times call me? And it just happened to be, that was back then, the Times was going through this enormous change, which was that they were going to move from black and white to color. I don't know if you remember, but this was like a very dramatic moment in the history of the Times. And they were also going to split up all the living sections into that was when dining was created and Sunday styles and all that. So anyway, they were hiring like crazy. It was like good times for the New York Times back then. And so they needed a junior reporter, and someone recommended me, and I luckily got the job and off to the races. And 11 years.
Where do you find authors for your site? Do you only do ad space or do you have sponsorships? And what kind of recommendations do you have for someone starting a blog now and when to kind of move into that monitoring?
So the ad world is an ugly place, and I wouldn't spend too much time focusing on it. There are a lot of decent networks, and I would try to get into a good network that you feel isn't going to put ads that you feel embarrassed about on your site, and it gives you the control over that. But and afterwards, I'd be happy to tell you a couple of the names of the networks. But we use a network. We're not big enough yet to have our own ad sales team, but that's the ultimate goal. Because then you can sort of go after the brands that you think are aligned with your brand.
I have sort of a two-part question. I wondered, when I'm researching on Google for recipes, is it a challenge for you to get Food52 to pop? And then secondly, how do you publicize the brand?
Well, we used to joke that we were that we were killing it on chicken gizzards, because we have some chicken gizzard recipe, and it shows up at the top of Google search for chicken gizzard. But
long tail search. That is our bread and butter for sure.
Yeah, we're never put in the word chicken, you will never find us, because there are huge recipes sites that they spend all of their time on SEO.
Kale and quinoa, however.
Yeah, kale and quinoa.
That combination.
Yeah, there are certain things Hotline, actually, we do very well on Google. But yeah, the Google search is and recipes is actually like an interesting topic and something we've covered actually on the site because they have been trying really hard at Google to like figure out a way to tell like which recipes are better. So in other words, not just ones that like get a lot of page views, but like to bring. They're doing their best to like kind of solve this really thorny problem that has developed, which is that like all recipes in these giant recipe websites have kind of like owned that space, owned the search space, but there are all of these amazing blogs with great recipes that have like big followings, but like tiny compared to these bigger recipe sites, and they want to find a way to kind of like even things out. But what they've done instead is like they've required bloggers and sites like ours to like have prep time, cook time, calories, etc. Like all this like detailed information and tagging on your recipes, but like no bloggers can do that. And I'm sorry, I hope I'm not boring you with detail, but this is actually like a very like hot topic in like the blogging world because it's unfair, and it's also for somebody who's searching for recipes, it's really unfortunate because you often like are missing a lot of really good content. And so interestingly, Google actually is completely, like somebody from Google commented on this post that we ran about it and said like we are actually aware of these issues and we're trying to fix it, but it's like it's not easy because bloggers don't have the means to like tag all of their recipes in the way that a bigger recipe site would, and we don't have even like the means to do that, and also we don't want to, like we refuse to put nutritional information on our recipes, which I know is controversial, but sorry, we're not going to change our minds. But the reason is because we feel like it sends a message about it, that it takes away from the pleasure of the food. Our general feeling is like if you see a cup of cream in a recipe, you know what you're getting yourself into. It would be us to tell you, right? So we've kind of taken a stand, but as a result, that limits how well we can perform on Google search, which then limits how much traffic we can get. It's kind of a complicated thing.
And just in terms of the second part of your question, so we, the one thing that we do to try and sort of get ourselves out there a little bit more is to partner with sites that we think are complementary and are larger than we are. So, there will be. We've had posts up recently, actually, on Yahoo Shine, which is their sort of lifestyle section of the site, and they just naturally have so much more traffic than we do. And if our content is showing up on their site, it's more likely to come up higher in search, and then people click through if they're interested in our content and check out Food52. And it's actually been a really successful endeavor because sure, there are a lot of people who might not be sort of naturally drawn to Food52's aesthetic or whatever it is on Yahoo who see the post there and may not be interested, but the people who click through tend to really be a quality audience and people that hopefully that do sign up for Food52 and come back to us again and again.
We have time for 2 more questions.
I'm wondering if you each have a favorite cookbook and
Ooh. I think there's only one answer to this question. That is a hard question. Well, I have one that I think I always think of just immediately and very fondly because I grew up with it, and it's the Fanny Farmer Cookbook, which there are so many gems in there, and my mother made so many of those recipes growing up that it's just very good.
I love the Italian baker bread. She wrote about, it's like 1985, I think it was published, which is sort of amazing. And it's like, she was the one really who got bakers excited to go to Italy and learn how to ciabatta. And, all of these, and all of the breads that we now, we consider normal everyday things that you can find on the grocery store. She's really responsible for that. She wrote these really great stories. She wrote these really great, stories about these bakers throughout Italy, and she sort of showed how, like, going from town to town in Italy, the breads change. And anyway, So I just think it's a really beautiful book, and there are no pictures. There are pictures of the breads on the cover, but the inside is just drawings, and I feel like I really learned how to make bread from it.
Can you repeat which book?
Oh, it's called The Italian Baker by Carol Field.
This is sort of like her question, but more narrowed down. So when you're at home cooking for your kids, or your friends, and your family, like I read Cooking for Mr. Latte, and one of your bacon and egg pasta is one of my like go-tos that I can make and things. So when you are at home, both of you cooking for whoever, what are your go-to things that you like to that you just make because it's easy, it's quick, you love it?
The sad part about being food writer is that everything is like an opportunity for a blog post. So there's no like going back to like the regulars. It's like I just ate this interesting thing in the restaurant. I gotta make it at home so I can write about it. There's a lot of that we do. Which is it's fun for us. This is what we do. But it's I don't know. Do you have some?
Yeah, I think it also, for me, and I think for you too, it depends so much on the time of year. And I find myself, cycling back to things every fall and sort of revisiting old friends. And something I love to do about this time of year, although it's been a little warm so far, is to make just a really easy, quick, I've actually written about it on the site. I call it just weeknight ragu. And usually I go to the farmer's market and see, whatever kind of ground meat looks interesting. So whether it's, turkey sausage or lamb or, some really lovely looking piece of beef. And then basically just do a really, really simple canned tomatoes, San Marzano tomatoes, onions, whatever herbs are lying around, and simmer everything together. Brown the meat, brown the onions, simmer everything together, and then just basically use it over the course of the week in lots of different ways. So either on pasta, or one of my favorite things to do is actually to bake a sweet potato and cut it open and then put the ragu on top of that, which to me is very autumnal.
Oh, I didn't get that.
You didn't really? Oh. I thought you knew everything about it.